I mean, I don't know how. Well, I don't know if I'm.
So what do we do?
If I'm a member, if I.
So orientation. Try to.
This first stuff I don't have to do.
We have a had a strong
Would you mind arguing?
Oh, yeah, that's not good. That's very not good. A lot of my problems. Yeah, that's very good.
So I thought it was fitting from.
Hey, Steve, do we have to have somebody at the May 4th WCA meeting?
Oh, yes, that's true.
I'll do it. I'll do it. I don't have a problem with that. My wife goes to meetings.
They used to have been in the office.
I didn't know. Sometimes
No, that's
people
fine.
do. I'll remember to skip the meetings every time. No, a lot of times what happens is.
I like it.
What's in the big envelope?
What?
What's in the big envelope?
I don't know.
Well, plus, I want to get Marty
Or
off.
papers.
Looks very heavy.
Yeah.
I really do. I want Marty off and then he's not even a vice chair. He's elected for the WCA board.
I don't know why.
It's a, and you know, have you been to one of those where they run the election? You just keep running the election until somebody wins by 2/3 majority. So we had 8 rounds of elections. Finally, people gave up and just said, "Oh,
Yeah, this is a lot easier.
And they didn't know. I got it like that, man.
This looks like something. Yeah. Lots of reading. Yeah.
I need to read this.
you need to read what? This WCA stuff? Little of it. Figure it out. I mean, but listen, this is what I do if I was you living. I'd wait till next fall when they have the convention and go.
Okay.
WCA thing's a good thing. You learn a lot. They have a lot of workshops and stuff. I like it. It's up in the Dells. You know, it's not bad.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda is going to be a review of the organizational meeting. Does everyone have at their seats a draft agenda for the organizational meeting that'll be next Tuesday at 4 p.m., April 16th? Okay, so I'm going to be working off this sheet to begin. For people that have been around, this is nothing new, but we'll go over kind of the sections of what's going to begin. So first will be a call to order, and then an administration of the oath of office, then a roll call, pledge of allegiance, introduction of new members. We'll comply that we're following the open meetings law, and then approve the agenda. So the first thing that the new board is going to do, so the new board will begin at this meeting, the 16th, is going to adopt the rules by which you will operate for the next 2 years. What current county board supervisors did at our last meeting was vote on a proposed slate of rules, and that'll be what we work off of. So that is the recommendation from the prior board for what the new board's rules going forward will be. But this new board is a different body. It's made up of different people. And so this new board has the right to do whatever they want with the rules. A copy of the board rules as recommended in March is in this same packet. I believe it is the first thing. No, it's the second thing in your packet. And we'll go through the board rules. Oh, that's a really unattractive. Thanks for warning me. So we will go through the board rules kind of a little bit more in depth together. But again, that's going to be the first thing that's done. If anyone has any changes to the board rules that were recommended by this last board, please let Corporation Counsel or administration know in advance so we can prepare something and assist with any amendments or changes that might be needed. But please go through these rules, especially if you are new to the board, and see if there's anything that stands out at you or anything that needs to be changed before the next meeting. The next thing that's going to be done, again, just turn that off, will be appointing the ballot clerks, who will then count the votes for the next thing on the agenda, which is the election of the county board chair. So we will be electing leadership at this next meeting. Our current leadership, County Board Chair Steve Nass, first Vice Chair Mike Winnicky, second Vice Chair Blaine Polson, but an entirely new slate of leadership will be chosen at this next meeting. It can be the exact same people, but again, they will be the new county board leadership. If called for, there will be committee elections, and then we'll move into kind of a regular meeting. Once we have our rules adopted and our leadership in place, we'll run a regular meeting with some things that do need to get done. A notice of public hearing on planning and zoning, a report from the treasurer, which is, we do monthly reports, and a report from Supervisor Coots about the Marsh Country Health Alliance. There will then be public comment. There are 2 public comment periods. One is for items that are on the agenda, and then one is a general public comment, and that's at the end. There will then be reports, resolutions, and ordinances that come out of committees. Looks like 2 proclamations from the county administrator, potential ordinance from the executive committee, potential ordinance or from the Land and Water Conservation Committee, and some things from the Planning and Zoning Committee. I think there also will be some stuff from the Highway Department, some resolutions that came forward there. But we'll go into kind of what's on that agenda a little bit later. Just wanted to give an overview of what you might see. I'm going to share my screen now. We're going to go a little bit into the county board rules. So if you could open then this larger packet to page 3, I'm just going to very, very quickly go through the board rules. This is not going to be an in-depth review. It's just going to point you to what is in every section so you're aware and can follow up as needed. So the board rules are adopted by ordinance. Like I said, there was a recommendation made by the prior county board, but the new county board is going to adopt their own rules to follow. And those rules are hard copy and also in Microsoft Teams. Please, again, read, review, and contact Corporation Counsel or administration with any questions. Okay. The first section then is the general procedure rules. It'll have information pertaining to meeting schedule, emergencies, quorum and attendance policies, order of business, public comment, remote participation, parliamentary procedure, agenda setting, voting, and more. It's probably the longest section of the rules, and it is worth reading through. 3.02 governs how county board officers are chosen. Again, that'll be done at the April 16th meeting, and it also handles the duties of the county board chair and how to handle vacancies in those offices. If you want to familiarize yourself with the voting process, and if you are running for office, that might be a very good thing to do. Please do so. It's in section 3.02 of the county board rules. 3.03 lays out duties of officials, mainly county staff, paid staff, including the county administrator, the treasurer, the clerk, corporation counsel, and the county board reporter. 3.04 lists and describes the 13 standing committees. Those committees, again, are the Broadband Working Group, Building and Grounds, Executive, Fair Park, Finance, Highway, Human Resources, Land and Water Conservation, Law Enforcement and Emergency Management, Parks, Planning and Zoning, Solid Waste and Air Quality, and University Extension Education. If you want to learn what those committees are responsible for and a little bit about what they do, that is all written directly in the board rules. 3.05 then also lists the 25 various boards, commissions, committees, and other bodies. These are different than standing committees. These are either created by the county or they're posts to which the county has a right to appoint representatives. So in some cases, there's only one county board supervisor that is a representative to that committee. 3.06 is the rules for how county board committees will work, including how the chair is chosen, attendance and quorum requirements, and compensation for committee attendance, as well as other topics. 3.07 is a very important part of the county board rules. That covers the open meetings law. We comply with the open meeting law as specified in the Wisconsin statutes. The statutes also give us the ability to go into closed session, but that's something we have to follow. The rules do also talk about that. Please familiarize yourself with 3.07. It's very important that we continue to follow the open meetings law. And the final section is 3.08, which is amendments to rules. And it's a short section that describes if you want to change the rules after they're adopted, here's how you do it. Now, throughout this orientation, Ben and I did some meetings with newer county board members to learn some things that they might have wanted to see in their first orientation. And so some of these items are going to be a little bit more of the informal processes and maybe highlighting some things that, again, some people might have wanted to know in their first few terms. So this is general decorum. In every instance, I'm trying to pull directly from the board rules. But if you ever have any questions, you can always ask kind of a more senior board member or a member of staff if you're so inclined. County board meetings are recorded and streamed. That includes this one. This is being streamed right now. And you are the people of Jefferson County's voice in their government. We do have people that attend and watch these proceedings, so we want to keep this as professional as we can. Any member of the board may be recognized to speak on the agenda topics during the meeting. Anyone at any time, under Robert's rules, can stand up and be recognized. So upon being recognized, what you do is you rise in place, and using the microphone that usually works, you will address the chair, not anyone else in the room, but all of your comments will be addressed to the chair, and you will not be interrupted by any other member except by a call to order. So you'll have the floor will be yours once you're recognized, addressing the chair. You will not speak more than twice on any question until all members who desire to speak have been heard. And even then, if you've already spoken twice in the same question, you'll have to obtain leave by the chair. And you will kind of confine your comments to the questions under consideration and shall at all times conduct themselves in a respectful manner. And if you're not talking, there will be no loud noises or conversations on the floor, which is here, or the visitor section, which is where the department heads will be sitting in the back. There are two sections of public comment in the agenda, like I said. The first is for items on the agenda, so people that want to speak on a specific topic don't have to wait for the full meeting. They'll be able to give you input, and you'll be able to take that into consideration as you are debating those topics yourself. But the general public comment is at the end of the agenda. The point of public comment, and especially kind of as we're complying with the open meetings law, is to listen but not necessarily respond. This is the public's opportunity to comment on the agenda, but because we haven't necessarily posted that we'd be talking about whatever these people are here for, we don't want to get into a discussion because that might be a violation of the open meetings law. So we want to make sure as people are commenting, it is kind of a one-way dialogue. We are listening and for the most part not responding. We did have some questions from people about ways to respond with constituent contacts. Obviously you are very driven people, you're in the community, you're engaged, and so you are going to be getting contacts from members of the public. For the most part, you will know the answers to them, but if you do not, when you receive questions or comments you can't immediately answer, here's some general guidelines, which would be one would be gather as much information as you can, preferably in writing, but not to make any promises back to that individual, and especially not to assume any wrongdoing by the county. You'll want to, if you can't answer the question, contact the appropriate department head. We always want to work through department heads, not the line staff. And if you are unsure to contact, or if you're not getting a response from the department head, please talk to the county administrator, Ben, me, or Danielle, our corporation counsel. You saw that most of the department heads, if not all of them, here tonight. And so it's a very good idea, especially if there's issues that you find yourself either gravitating towards or if there's constituents that have a lot of issues, make sure you familiarize yourselves with those department heads so you can more effectively communicate. Your meeting materials, like your packet, will be given out the Wednesday before your county board meeting. So your meeting's on Tuesday. The Wednesday before, you will get that packet by email. And the same will be done for meeting notices and agendas for the week. Sometimes that will change depending on if there are committees that meet and we're waiting for materials that we can get out to you. But you should, for the most part, expect by email that stuff the Wednesday before. Departments may also email committee materials to committee members at different times. And again, those timelines may shift, but we will always be in compliance with the Wisconsin Open Meetings Law. And finally, every Friday, I send out an internal newsletter that just goes over a couple announcements and maybe some upcoming events, and then also information on what happened in each committee. Now, I'm not going to talk about everything the committee did, but if there's something that is going from the committee that we'd anticipate at the county board, I try and include that in those newsletters. So that is the end of what I have here. We will now turn it over to our county clerk, who will go over the voting process for election of board leadership.
Hi, I'm Audrey McGraw. I looked over the recommended county board rules and found them extremely confusing. So I tried to put it in my own words, and now that I'm reading it, find this extremely confusing. So hopefully this will make sense to you guys. So I just want to talk to you about the process of electing officers for the county board chairperson, first vice chair, and second vice chair in that order. This will take place next week, Tuesday, April 16th. My 2 deputies and myself will be responsible for running these elections. What we will do is hand out nomination ballots where you will select one nominee. Once your selection has been made, we will collect the ballots from you to tally them. We will announce the nominees, at which point they will be able to accept or deny the nomination. If by chance there are more than 2 nominees, we will then hand out a primary ballot. Whether a primary is necessary or not, the nominees will have 3 minutes to address the board if they so desire. If a primary is necessary, on this ballot you may only vote for one nominee. These winning nominees and totals will be announced once they are tallied. When this is narrowed down to 2 nominees, we will conduct the election that will determine the officers of the board. These results will be tallied and announced. We will continue this process until all officers are elected. How'd I do? That makes sense? Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. We'll do a quick review of what is going to be on the Tuesday agenda. So especially our new county board members have some background for your first votes. There may be still some other things that are noticed, but I am tracking right now that the Highway Committee is going to have 4 different resolutions. The first one deals with the local road improvement program. So that is a state program that we bid for, and the requirements of that we go through one asphalt bid for that project. So the Highway Committee went out and solicited bids. Those prices included not only the materials, but also the delivery and all ancillary costs for getting it to the site. And so the resolution will be approving that low bid for the contract for the full year for the local road improvement program, one of the many local improvement programs we have. Then there are going to be 3 resolutions that all kind of are done procedurally the same way, which are quotes for year-round. So for other programs, as needed, this authorizes the Highway Committee to get materials from different vendors at these prices and lock in these quotes. So this is something, the first one is just for the LRIP program. The rest is for everything year-round. And you'll be approving the quotes for multiple different vendors for the pre-mix, hot mix asphalt, seal coat oil, and asphalt pulverizing and milling. There will be a resolution, or ordinance rather, coming forward from the Land and Water Conservation Committee that will be prohibiting trespass on county-owned farmland. It began kind of as an idea for some more clarity on hunting, preventing hunting on county-owned farmland. But this goes a little bit further and includes all trespassing with certain exceptions like Potter's Field, the access trail to Potter's Field, and the nearby bike path. And it also gives the Land and Water Conservation Director and the county administrator some authority to grant a waiver for this trespassing. There also is an exception for county staff doing county business out there as long as there's been certain notifications in place. There will always be some zoning stuff that takes place. In previous orientations, the zoning director, Matt Zengel, stand up, Matt. Hi, Matt. Has gone through some of the zoning process. It's something that happens often, that the full county board amends the official zoning map. But in your packet, again, is information on the zoning process. It's like 4 pages of very good information if you're unfamiliar with the zoning process. Then there will be some proclamations coming forward, one from the Law Enforcement Emergency Management Committee related to National 911 Telecommunicator Week, one on National Police Week, and then Fair Housing Week also coming forward. So that's what I have right now. If you have any questions about what is on the agenda, especially new members, if you'd like some more background, we will talk about that. There is another section of this orientation I'll be going into that is Not necessarily something that'll be done on Tuesday, but some of the larger county issues that you'll want to get up to speed on quickly and some background on that. Some of the larger things you'll be voting on, you might be getting questions from constituents about. And now I believe it is time for our Corporation Council to go through some of the legal issues.
Hello? Okay. All right. So I'm going to touch on some important legal topics that'll be relevant to your service on the county board. This is going to be a high-level overview of some of these topics, which can be relatively complex, but it's a refresher for some of you. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. If you'd prefer to discuss it outside of this meeting, my office door is always open. So the issues we're going to talk about today are the transparency laws that are relevant to your service on the board, that being open meetings, which Michael touched on, public records, which goes hand in hand with records retention, the code of ethics that applies to local officials, and then everybody's favorite, parliamentary procedure. So first, just as it relates to these transparency provisions, these are some of the most important obligations that you have as public officials. The benefits of any good substantive policy that you pass here can quickly be overshadowed by an open meetings violation. As you guys are aware, those are the types of issues that hit the newspaper. So we don't want that hard work to be cast aside by an open meetings oversight. In recognition of the importance of open meetings and transparency, the legislature explicitly made a policy declaration that the public is entitled to the fullest and most complete information regarding the affairs of government. There is a presumption of openness, and it's important to keep this policy in mind when we analyze what's required of us under the open meetings. If the county ever had the misfortune of being involved in litigation for alleged violations of open meetings, the courts will be cognizant of this language, and all of the decisions that the county makes will be interpreted in light of that policy declaration. So we always err on the side of openness. The purpose of open meetings, as you all are aware, is to have an informed electorate, to allow for public input, and most importantly, to have accountability. And we want to limit the government business that's occurring behind closed doors. So, all meetings of governmental bodies have to comply with open meetings, and to do that, they have to be preceded by public notice, publicly held and open to all, and reasonably accessible to all members of the public. So, governmental bodies and meetings are defined terms. For your purposes, a governmental body includes the county board, it includes all sub-bodies of the county board, all committees created by the county board. The definition of what is a meeting is a little trickier. The Showers test, which was developed by some case law, says there are two characteristics that must be present to constitute a meeting, and that's this purpose and numbers. So the purpose is you look at whether the purpose of your gathering is to conduct governmental business. Governmental business is defined broadly. It includes preliminary discussions, information gathering. It's not just decision making. On the flip side, the purpose test is not satisfied if there's a social gathering or a chance gathering when there's no discussion of topics over which this body has jurisdiction. And the numbers qualification is whether or not this event or gathering includes enough members to affect the outcome of any given action. So for the numbers test, you look at whether the number of members participating meets that threshold. And then the threshold can vary depending upon the type of action. So it's, as I said, a bit of a moving target. Generally, the number of members is sufficient to constitute a meeting if it's the number of members, if the number of members participating is equal to a quorum. So as you guys are aware, a quorum is the minimum number of members that can be present or that are required to be present in any given meeting to transact business. So for the county board, a quorum is the majority of members. However, just to make it complicated, you can have a meeting under the open meetings law without a quorum in the traditional sense, and that is what's referred to as a negative quorum. A negative quorum occurs when there's a gathering of less than a quorum, but that number of people can determine the course of action. There's enough people present to block action. So the easiest way to think about that is for budget amendments require a 2/3 vote. If you wanted to block a budget amendment here, assuming we had 30 members on the county board, 10 people, 11 people could block that action. And so that would be a negative quorum. Obviously, there's a greater risk of violating the open meetings by having incidental meetings when we deal with smaller bodies. So when you're talking about your committee assignments, those are much smaller. If a committee has 5 members, then your quorum that you're dealing with is 3. So it is tricky to pin down. If you have questions about it, certainly ask, but we just sort of err on not discussing government business with a group of individuals outside of your notice meetings. So you can also technically have a violation of the open meetings law without having a quorum or a negative quorum of members physically present at the same time. And that's what's referred to as a walking quorum. That occurs when members communicate via a series of gatherings or contacts. Each individual meeting or discussion is less than a quorum, but combined, all of those meetings could, if they result in an agreement, whether that's you say everybody's going to vote X, or it just is a tacit agreement to act in a particular way, that would be a walking quorum and a violation of the open meetings. So while the walking quorum and the negative quorum, they are complicated. If you look at the policy behind open meetings, you can see why both of those would be violations, because both can produce a predetermined outcome. And as a result, any subsequently held public meeting is just a mere formality. Technology is advancing much faster than the law in this area. And so the Attorney General has issued opinions that caution against the use of electronic communication between board members, and that's just because the rapid pace of the communication is akin to or resembles face-to-face communication and can create those walking quorum issues. So we, to the extent we can, avoid those substantive discussions via email communication or text messages between board members. That is okay for quick incidental communication, but we should not be carrying on private debate and discussion on substantive issues which would belong in an open meeting. Michael touched on closed session, so this is a limited exception to the requirement that the public be permitted to observe meetings. There are very specific statutory requirements to having a closed session. Advance notice of a closed session is still required. So in the event there's going to be a closed session, that notice has to include and reference one of those specific statutory requirements. When you are in a closed session, then you can only discuss what is noticed as being discussed in the closed session. So just a couple of notes on compliance. How do we ensure that we're complying with open meetings? We have to prepare an agenda. That agenda is prepared with the assistance of staff and your committee chairs or your chair of the board. It is posted in advance of all meetings. It includes the time, date, place, and subject matter of the meeting. Whatever you put on the agenda, you are limited to discuss those items only, except when a specific statutory exemption exists. The doors are open for all of our meetings. And again, we would just limit substantive discussion amongst members outside of meetings. So the penalties for violating open meetings: the court can void any decision that is made at an illegal meeting. They can also fine individual members for violations of open meetings. But I think the most impactful consequence, obviously, is the loss of public trust that occurs when there's an open meetings violation. Any questions on open meetings? Okay, so then going now to public records. This is very similar to open meetings in that the legislature explicitly made a policy declaration to provide complete public access. Again, those overarching ideals of transparency. And so in the event of a litigation or a dispute in regards to public records, the presumption will always be for access. So what are the requirements? All records of a governmental body can be requested by anyone for any reason or no reason at all. The motivation behind a public records request does not matter. Many of you who have been around know that there can be a tendency to weaponize the public records law, use it as a fishing expedition, request all text messages, all emails, all communication, social media posts that occurred for the last 5 years of every board member that sits here. Unfortunately, that doesn't matter. We still have to respond. We have an obligation under the law to respond. Absent a statutory exception, generally we have to produce all of our records that are responsive as soon as practicable, which the Attorney General has told us is approximately 10 days. There is a balancing test. If there's a particular concern about releasing a record, it's case by case, based on the totality of the circumstances, very fact intensive. But again, the strong presumption is for the right to access. There are very limited circumstances where a right to privacy would overcome a public records request. Generally, that's related to safety, or if there's a victim identified in the public records request, or if there is a present sort of bargaining or negotiation that would need to be redacted for a period of time. Those would be the exceptions. So what is a record? Essentially anything. Anything that is kept or created by a governmental authority can be a public record. There are very limited exceptions, that being drafts, notes, materials you prepare for purely personal use, and copyrighted materials. The personal use exception, we'll get into that a bit with some more detail. But essentially, it's pretty narrowly construed. An example that they use to define that is if you were taking notes at a committee meeting just to jog your memory down the road for your own personal use, those would not create a record. However, the second you distribute those to other members to prove your point or to refresh their recollection, they are no longer for purely personal use, and they can become a public record. So the content determines if an item is a public record, not the medium, format, or location. It does not matter if the record is on your personal computer, your personal email, your cell phone. It matters whether or not that conversation or communication pertains to government business. So that applies to all electronic communication as well. So again, this purely personal exception, the Attorney General has been clear that this exception is to be narrowly applied. If there's any discussion of government business, it's no longer purely personal. The analysis comes into play a lot when there's a request for email or text messages. The general rule, again, is that if it discusses or is related in any way to your official duties, the affairs of government, and the official acts of the county officers and employees, it is not purely personal. So this is why it's best practice to keep your county business on county email and personal business on a personal account. Then, in the event of an open records request, there is no need for us to parse through and draw a line between personal and county business in order to respond to that request. public records retention. So going hand in hand with our responsibility to disclose records, obviously we also have to retain them so that they are available to disclose. You, as local officials, are required to cooperate in the preservation and disclosure of public records. You cannot destroy any public records. There is a retention period governed by statute. The default is 7 years. Lucky for you, the county takes care of retaining most of the records related to government business on behalf of the officials. So that would pertain to agendas, minutes, emails on your county email, because those go through the county server. The exception, again, is records on your personal devices and accounts, social media posts, those types of things. So social media. This is another example where we have sort of outgrown the law. The use of social media is fraught with potential public records issues. The law is clear that a social media post can be a public record, even if it's on your personal page. If it relates to official government functions, it's a public record. So, for example, if you had posted on your personal page asking what everyone's opinion was on the fair, for example, that could be or would be a public record that would have to be retained. That's not easy. We haven't quite figured out a way in which we would do that. And so, again, try to keep personal business and official business separate so that we don't get ourselves in a situation where we have to parse through your personal Facebook accounts. In addition to the public records concerns related to social media, there is another landmine that I'm just going to touch on, and we won't go into detail on today, but you have to be cognizant of First Amendment implications. So if you are posting on your Facebook and you are posting about an official government business, you cannot block or delete negative or questionable comments on posts made by public citizens if it pertains to a county board member. That would be impinging upon their First Amendment right to free speech. So again, if you don't want to see those comments, don't post about those things on your personal Facebook page. So just a couple of tips as it pertains to public records. You have to be cognizant of the fact that any records you create are subject to disclosure. So use your professional judgment when you're putting something in writing. You should think, would you want to see it in the newspaper? There is no exception for disclosure, regardless of whether the record is embarrassing to you or negative in some way. We would have to disclose it. I've touched on this, but again, create a separation between official business and personal matters if you want to retain that purely personal exception. Only use your county email address for county business. Lastly, if you receive an open records request, my office wants to know about it. We will assist you in responding to that request. It's best if you let us know ASAP, because as I mentioned, there is a time consideration, and delay or denial in responding can lead to liability. Any questions on public records? All right, moving right along. Ethics of local officials. So all elected officials are bound by a code of ethics. We have an ordinance that pertains to your code of ethics, as well as statutory codification by the state. So you can think of the code of ethics generally as a codification of the gut check, or what some would refer to as the smell test. The language is probably fraught with legalese, but what it boils down to is if it feels wrong, don't do it. If it could reasonably be perceived as improper, don't do it. We are to avoid the appearance of impropriety, to avoid being front page on the newspaper, essentially. There's a purpose behind the code of ethics that is essentially to limit undue influence, to ensure you're not profiting from holding office. I'm sure that's why you all became county board members, and preserve the public confidence in the board. again, so this cites to your ethics ordinance. It specifically says that you are to recognize the public interest as your primary concern. So the public is the master of the public servant. Keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're engaging in decisions. Impartiality. You can't get any special advantages or give anybody any special advantages because of your position here on the board. It's pretty simple. You can't use the county fleet to take a vacation or run a profit cab service. You can't get special favors for members of your family or friends. Everyone has to be treated the same way you would treat any other citizen. There are a host of provisions as it relates to conflicts of interest. All of them, again, sort of boil down to you cannot engage in matters that would be beneficial to you or your immediate family from a financial standpoint. You can't accept gifts or favors if that could be reasonably expected to influence your vote. Anything of value in our ordinance and consistent with the state statute is defined as anything with a value of $25 or more. So, what should you do in the event that you have a conflict or a matter comes before the board that you should not participate in? You need to note that you're recusing yourself right away at the forefront of the meeting. You should refrain from participating in any discussions, deliberations, or votes related to that matter. In some circumstances, it may be best for the official to leave the room during discussion. Again, that's sort of on a case-by-case, depending upon the nature of the item. And then you want to be sure that the minutes reflect that you are abstaining. This is important. When you are in doubt about whether or not you have an ethical issue, you can and should request an advisory opinion from my office. That is your get out of jail free card. If I get it right, if I get it wrong, if you request an opinion and you comply with what I have advised, it's prima facie evidence that you intended to comply with the ethics code, and therefore were not violating the code if you were to be involved in any litigation. There are penalties for violating the ethics code. They vary depending upon the severity. Unlike open records and public records, you do have exposure for criminal prosecution for violation of the ethics code that you should be cognizant of. Questions about ethics? Okay. Parliamentary procedure. What is it? So as most of you know, it's procedural rules for running an effective meeting. It's a method to get business before the body. There are several sources of potential procedural rules. The state law has some procedural rules as far as what percentage is required to pass an action. The state law takes precedent over your local rules. Your local rules, which Michael touched on, are your board rules. Those would take precedence over Robert's Rules of Order, which covers everything else. So Robert's rules, admittedly, they can be intimidating and they can seem overly complicated. But if you focus on the basics and don't get bogged down, they're relatively easy to use. So they outline the rules of engagement so that debate, discussion, and decision-making are transacted in an orderly manner. The trick is to balance the rights of individual members with the rights of the body. And they are not intended to be used for obstructive purposes. So our intent is not to, have a gotcha and prohibit you from doing something because of Robert's rules. That's not the thought process behind them. So, making a motion. That is the method in which action is brought before the body. A main motion would clearly state your proposal, preferably in the affirmative. And then that motion would need to be seconded. The chair then restates your motion. That transfers ownership of the motion over to the body. And the reason why that second and that transfer is necessary because it signals that the motion is worthy of debate. No debate happens until that second and the transfer. Then you would engage in debate, which is a discussion on the merits of the question, essentially whether the proposed action should be taken or not. As Michael touched on, every member has the opportunity to speak during debate. There are some restrictions as to the amount of time a member should speak or the length of their presentation. All remarks should be addressed to the chair, so you are speaking to the chair and not to your other fellow supervisors. And you are to avoid personalities, is how they refer to it, but essentially means be courteous to the other members. So there's an exception to the rule about seconding a motion before any discussion for committees. Committees are much less formal. Discussion can be permitted before a motion is pending, and members are generally allowed to speak as often and as long as they'd like, certainly subject to the rules of the chair of that committee. Amendments. Amendments are made to a main motion to change it in some way, whether that be deleting provisions or inserting words. Amendments, just like your main motion, require a second. A member can move to amend a primary amendment with a secondary amendment, but no more than 2 motions to amend can be pending at the same time. So aside from your main motion, there are subsidiary motions, and those are actions that are applied to another motion, and if adopted, do something to that main motion. And we'll talk about a few of those that come up more often. The first being a motion to lay on the table. This would temporarily set aside an action with the intent to take it up later in that meeting. It is only appropriate if something else of immediate urgency has arisen or when something else needs to be addressed before consideration of the pending question is resumed. We often mistakenly use table when we really mean postpone for a certain time. And so you should be cognizant of what a motion to lay on the table is for. It essentially, adopting it halts consideration without debate. And you would then move on to the next item on the agenda. A motion to postpone. So motion to postpone would delay pending action. This motion should include a specific time the matter is postponed to. So that could be a date certain, a specific meeting, or following a certain event. This motion is debatable. Motion to postpone indefinitely. This is used when a body declines to take a position. Adopting this motion effectively kills the motion or the action. It is debatable, and it's useful in disposing of badly chosen main motions that can't be either adopted or rejected without undesirable consequences. So that's generally what individuals tend to want to be doing when they say table, and they should be saying they postpone indefinitely. Moving the previous question, this is used to bring the pending motion to an immediate vote. It is not debatable. Because it is not debatable, it requires a 2/3 vote. And then point of order. This is used when a member feels the rules of procedure are being violated. It does not require a second. It's not debatable. Takes precedence over whatever else is occurring. Essentially, the chair then rules on the question to determine whether the rules are being followed or applied appropriately. So that's really a snippet or a high-level overview, particularly as it relates to parliamentary procedure. I have included some resources. There are a lot of great resources and cheat sheets available for parliamentary procedure. Again, it's not meant to be a barrier to active participation. So if you have questions and concerns or you're intimidated by parliamentary procedure, I was too at first. Feel free to come and ask me any question you have. That's it. Any questions?
All right. I'm gonna get back on my computer, but it'll take me a second, so if everyone needs to stand up and stretch for a little bit, we've probably got, I don't know, we got still half the agenda left, so give about 30 seconds to get your blood flowing again.
Thanks. Let's see what I can do.
That was tough.
You should be flowing well, Walt.
What's that?
You should be flowing well.
Actually, it probably is.
How you feeling?
I feel pretty good. They never had a problem.
Okay. So before we get into my PowerPoint, I want to again point you back to this packet that starts with our new county logo on the front. The very first thing that you'll see after the table of contents, it says Jefferson County Board Orientation Materials in Microsoft Teams. So in Microsoft Teams, there is a folder that has orientation materials in it. And this is a list of everything you'll find. Some of our large plans, so our couple hundred pages in that first section that we didn't want to print off, including our budget. There's also fillable forms that will allow you to order business cards, if that's something you'd like to order. And also it's how you'll commit or submit your interest survey for what committees you'd like to serve on. I ask you to do that sooner rather than later, because the new county board chair, that will be one of their first responsibilities. And the sooner we have committees figured out, the sooner we can meet. There are some committees that need to meet right away, like planning and zoning. It would be nice if our Fair Park Committee met quickly, because we have that coming up sooner rather than later. And there are a number of committees that have some outstanding items. So please look for that in the fillable forms section of Microsoft Teams. In this document as well is some information on how to get to Microsoft Teams if you're having problems with that. Also our policies, like our code of ethics, some instructions, and then other guides, some resources from some other local government partners. In this thing itself, you'll see again a summary of zoning processes, information on what the county departments do, a proposed meeting schedule. There have been some committees that are changing slightly when they'll meet, and so if that is part of your interest survey, as well, I know I'm free Wednesday mornings, I want to choose a committee that meets Wednesday mornings. Again, look in here for that information. Information on how to navigate the website, log into your Outlook web access, how the Forta token multi-factor authentication works, how to get to Teams, Microsoft Teams, how to work your county board tablet, how to access your calendars, how to do per diem mileage and expenses through that, and the Open Meetings app, which is how you'll run your tablets during county board meetings. So this packet is something you want to refer to, and again, there's more in Microsoft Teams. If you have any questions on that stuff, please let me know. Another thing that came up during some of our meetings with supervisors is to touch briefly on the legislative process. There actually, under the recommended board rules, are some changes. So we'll pay attention. There's a committee bypass procedure that was created under these recommended rules, and also some clarification on how to get something on a committee agenda. So here in Jefferson County, the county board is the sole lawmaking body. We operate under county administrator structure. There are some counties that have a county executive that's different than a county administrator, and further different than a county administrative coordinator. Those are the three ways counties can be organized. A county executive, which we don't have, is elected countywide and has veto power. A county administrator does not. County administrator is appointed by the county board, and therefore all legislation ends with the county board. The county board can pass ordinances, which are laws, can pass resolutions, which are kind of more one-time issues, again, like what we're doing with the highway department, accepting bids. That will be more of a resolution rather than an ordinance, which is ongoing law, and proclamations, and can also adopt policies. All of these are on our website. I think I'll probably get to it at the end. I think I have a link for that. So step one for all legislation is it comes through the committee. The board rules actually specifically state that all legislation shall originate from or be routed through the committee system. The chair of the committee sets that committee agenda. And like Danielle was saying, committees have to follow open meetings law, so anything that's on the agenda is all they can talk about. They can't talk about anything that was not properly noticed on the agenda. Once it's on an agenda, so once someone gets an idea on the committee agenda, the committee then can choose by vote to direct staff to prepare a draft ordinance or resolution. So staff will help write up in line with probably what you mean. Some things like this county ordinance, trespassing ordinance are relatively simple, about a page, and can probably be done in one meeting, but some things you'll direct staff to go do some research and prepare some ideas for. When the ordinance finally is to the committee's liking, the committee can place it on the agenda for a vote. And once that passes, then it can be taken up by the county board. There are some exceptions to this agenda setting, and I'm putting this in asterisk because it is in the board rules, but a final version, again, will be adopted at your next meeting, so this can change. But right now, in the recommended board rules, if a committee chair gets a written request to place something on an agenda, and that written request is signed by 5 different county board members, that committee chair must place the item on the agenda no later than 60 days after receiving that request, given that it's in the subject matter area. Furthermore, again, final version TBD, legislation can be sponsored by a group of 9 county board supervisors without the necessity of committee approval. This is written in the recommended rules as, quote, the committee bypass procedure. So if after review and consideration by the relevant committee, the committee either takes no action or takes adverse action, something like laying it on the table or maybe more properly indefinitely postponing it, a group of 9 county board supervisors shall submit a signed memo outlining their proposal along with the draft resolution or ordinance that will go to the county board chair. And if there are 9 signatures on that document, the county board chair shall place the item on the next county board agenda, following appropriate public notice requirements. This is a brand new addition to the rules and a way to get legislation through, not going through the committee process. After a committee does pass something, though, before it gets to the county board, they will go to staff. They'll be submitted in writing, and what staff will do then is prepare an executive summary. This is new. It will reference where that ordinance or resolution fits in the applicable portion of the strategic plan, and it will prepare a fiscal note. The Corporation Counsel and Finance Director will review all these resolutions and ordinances, make sure they're in their proper form and that they are legal before submitting to the county board. If there are any issues, they will get sent back to the committee. And then that will be on the county board agenda. So there is a section for committee reports, resolutions, and ordinances, and they'll be listed kind of under the committee bringing forth these items. So I said there's going to be 4 things coming from highway. Those will all be grouped together. There's going to be something coming for land and water conservation that'll be grouped under that heading. And what will happen is the committee chair from that relevant committee will rise and will read the title of that resolution or ordinance. And what they're going to read is the full executive summary. So for people that are new, they're not going to be reading the full ordinance or the full resolution, but sometimes they can be quite lengthy. Supervisor Jones usually has to read out a couple pages every meeting, and so you'll hear his voice or the Finance Committee chair's voice a lot. That executive summary will include the fiscal note and the strategic plan reference. Then typically after that committee chair is done reading the executive summary, they'll make a motion to adopt that resolution ordinance. A second is required, there will be discussion, and then it will go to a vote. Before the vote happens, any member with a potential conflict of interest shall advise the board chair, either through writing or spoken, that they will not be participating in the discussion or vote. That's in board rules. There are two different ways that a vote can be undertaken. One is a simple voice vote, and another is a roll call vote. So under a voice vote, the chair will call out for all those in favor to say aye and those opposed to say nay. And if it's close, they can then follow up with a roll call vote. Any member at any time can request that any vote be done by roll call instead of by voice. A roll call is required in certain circumstances, though, for things like an unbudgeted expenditure of county funds or an adoption of the county budget. On a roll call vote, all members have to vote. They have the right to change their vote until the time it's announced, so the clerk will usually request once everything's final, and then the voting results will be displayed, and those will be a matter of record. Budget amendments, like Danielle was referencing earlier, do require a 2/3 vote of all county board members, so that means the budget and certain other things have to pass with 20 votes, and those have to be done by roll call. So minutes for the county board meeting are approved by the executive committee, then the full county board at its next meeting, and finally published in the paper of record. Earlier this year, we said that would be the Jefferson County Union. And so that is, for the next 2 years, our paper of record will be publishing our minutes there. Right now, we publish our ordinances and policies on our website, which I think I'll probably have to share separately here. So you can see, this is our county website. Under government, you can either click on it there or you can go directly to ordinances and policies. But if you were to click on government, you would then go to county board and you can look at our ordinances, which are 54 different documents, things like our access, alarm system, board rules, citations, civil service, or you can look at our policies. And these are some things you have references to in there. Things like our budget amendment policy, our carry forward policy, our debt service policy. We have a purchase card policy, things like that, social media policy. So it might be good to familiarize yourself again on our website, jeffersoncountywi.gov, government, ordinances and policies. Danielle, currently our corporation counsel, is in the middle of a codification process that goes back at least 2 other county corporation councils to do what's called, I am looking for my PowerPoint, a codification process. So that will be bringing all of our ordinances and policies into one document. So that is a massive project that is going right now and has a completion date of sometime soon, end of the year. Okay, any questions on the legislative process? All right, moving right along. I did make one slideshow look pretty, and it's this one. So let's see if I can get it to work. There we go, general information. All right, so this is on your agenda. We're going to go through these bullet points, and then we'll basically be done. So first, building security. You're all familiar with it. You all saw it. There's one entrance to this building, and that is the doorway facing the parking lot at the bottom of those stairs there. Doors are open between 7:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m., although there are exceptions to those. For instance, right now, because we're having a publicly noticed meeting, those doors are staffed and are open. They are staffed by sheriff's deputies. They are restricted entry. There is a metal detector, and they are, again, the only door you can get in. All other courthouse doors are only emergency exits. There is another entrance to right now where the sheriff's department and emergency management are because of some of the construction. That is on the street running east-west, south of here. What street is that? Washington. Okay, so it's on Washington. So emergency management right now actually has a Washington Street address. But when the sheriff's department and all that is done, there will still be a separate entrance off the parking lot for the sheriff's department for people that are wishing to go in there and in to visit the jail. Everyone is issued a county ID badge. It looks like this. Please wear it whenever you're in the courthouse. If you don't have it, you will have to go through restricted entry. There are many, many people coming through those doors. The deputies don't always know everyone. And so if you don't have it, go through security, no exceptions. It's a lot easier to wear it, and a lot of the doors in here are restricted only to people that have badge access to there. The courthouse is monitored by cameras, and all departmental offices and meetings rooms are equipped with panic buttons that dispatch to the courthouse security personnel. There are little flips that you can do. They sometimes are easy to trip. There have been supervisors in the past that have tripped it a couple times during a meeting. So it might be a good idea if you're a committee chair to familiarize yourself with where in the room under the tables those panic buttons are. I do not believe everywhere has them yet as we're going through this courthouse renovation, but everywhere will. Okay, this again is stuff that came up from feedback from other county board supervisors. In this big packet from the Wisconsin Counties Association, they have a handbook that goes through a lot of material that is relevant for counties across Wisconsin. And one thing I think they do very well in the intro section is a discussion on the roles of county board supervisors versus county staff. It is a delicate line. You are the lawmaking body, you approve the budget, and at the end of the day, through Ben and through our organizational chart, everyone reports to you. You are the bosses, you are the voice of the people, we are a public entity, and we report to the county board. However, you have a $106 million budget, some of which goes to pay professional staff to give you opinions and to do things that you don't want to do. And so it's a very delicate line to walk when you should listen to staff and when you should assert your authority as a county board supervisor. And I think the material presented in this handbook does a very good job of laying out that balance so you can understand it. Everyone's going to find it for yourselves, especially as you get more comfortable. And staff obviously needs to understand this balance as well. But that was one question that came up, and I think it's a really great resource for people to look at. There are actually 2 counties association conferences that you should definitely consider registering for and attending. One of them is the annual conference. That's the larger one. It's general for a ton of information. There are breakout sessions. Thousands of people attend it statewide. It's a really, really great experience, and you can learn a lot from them, and you can network really well with other counties. That changes location every year. It's usually in September. It's their annual meeting. Last year it was at the Kalahari, and next year it'll be, I think, September 22nd or so in La Crosse. Please register for that. I think registration is going to come up relatively quickly, so just don't miss it. I know a lot of, especially newer members, do enjoy going to that. There's also a legislative conference that happens every February in Madison. During busy Februaries in the Capitol, there is some lobbying that's done to our state delegation, but there's also more of a discussion and is based mainly on state issues. So if you are more interested in kind of the politics and things like that, it's a great one to go to. If you're more interested in kind of the broader policy issues, the annual conference is worth going to. I think both are incredibly important, and it's a lot of fun too. That's something that you will get reimbursement for if it's something you choose to attend and register. Speaking of reimbursements, there is a reimbursement protocol. It is in Microsoft Teams and some of those folders I talked about. But basically, you are reimbursed for committee meetings, but there are some times where you will have to ask the committee, the county board chair for permission or what their decision is on reimbursing. For instance, we had a lot of strategic plan meetings that were not necessarily part of a committee, but the decision was made to reimburse people and pay per diems for things like that. But not every meeting that you're doing is going to be a reimbursable expense. Sometimes if you're meeting with people in the district, you might not be able to get reimbursement for that. So please look at the reimbursement protocol, and if you have questions, you can talk to staff, but ultimately it's the county board chair who makes that decision at the end of the day. The county board rules, as proposed, have a requirement that draft minutes, will be prepared and presented to committee members 10 days after, no later than 10 days after the committee meets. We will do a good job with that as we can. Again, these are draft minutes, though. Minutes don't become official until they're adopted by the body. And minutes are not going to be a verbatim record of everything that's done. They are going to provide a legal summary of what was prepared at each meeting. And so staff is going to prepare them with as much detail as we can provide, but a pitfall that we do not want staff going down is to provide their own editorialization of what happened at a committee. So if I were to try and remember verbatim what was said, I might accidentally highlight one person's arguments over another if that was what I believed, and therefore the official record would actually reflect Michael Lucky's bias on what he heard during that meeting. So we try and keep minutes as unbiased and professional as possible. And again, we are going to be getting those out in draft form no later than 10 days after that's done. Agendas also have to be publicly noticed and are worked with the county board, or the committee chairs rather, to come up with. If you ever have any questions about what will be on an agenda, you can work with the department head or the committee chair. And again, if you want something on the agenda, that is their decision. There are also reports that are given by each department head during their meetings, and so if you would like kind of in advance notice of what might be discussed during those department reports, please work with the department heads. Speaking of department heads, we have 26 departments with 699 employees. It's a lot to keep track of, so please, again, work with department heads rather than employees themselves. If you want to find out more about departments, that's in the 2024 budget document, but again, I took that snippet and it's on page 31 of your prepared materials here. You can also find an organizational chart, but I will link to that. And we will provide you with a department head directory and contact list. This is the org chart for the county. Up here at the very top are the people of Jefferson County who make all the decisions, but they make the decisions through you, the County Board of Supervisors, who then appoints the county administrator, who then in turn appoints all of these different department heads. The people of Jefferson County also elect some department heads: the circuit court judges, the clerk of courts, the county clerk, the district attorney, the register of deeds, the sheriff, and the treasurer are all constitutional officers elected by the people, but every other department is appointed by the county administrator, who in turn is appointed by you. And so you, the County Board of Supervisors, is the voice of the people here in the county. Facilities map. We do have a couple of facilities that are not on this location. We have a sheriff's annex facility. We have some highway facilities, satellite facilities. We have a shooting range. We have a number of different parks facilities. But for the most part, our facilities are centrally located in the city of Jefferson, our county seat. I'll start kind of in the northeast corner. This big red one is our fair park. As you go down furthermore, on this left side, number 9 is our highway department. 6 and 7 is where our health department and our human services department are. 3 and 4 here is our workforce center. That was where the UW Extension and our workforce development office are. We do have a parks maintenance facility here on South Industrial Drive. And this is where we're sitting now, in the courthouse, the sheriff's department, and we do have some auxiliary facilities, like for instance, our IT, MIS, is at a building across the street. So for most part, our facilities are here in the city of Jefferson. And if anyone would ever like a tour of any other facilities, please let me know, and I'd be happy to arrange that. If you'd also like a tour to see where some of the construction is, we can also arrange that through the Building and Grounds Committee. So I mentioned I would get to some upcoming county issues that might not be on your agenda next week, but you can probably anticipate happening this session. Number 1, solar projects. We have some ongoing solar projects in the west of our county and a proposed solar project in the northeast of our county straddling 4 different towns. I would anticipate that that is going to be coming forward. Solar is regulated by the Public Service Commission once it reaches a certain output capacity, and the proposal that we're seeing from this company is going to meet that threshold, which means that we as a county have limited ability to modify or stop the project, but we do have ability to monitor it and stay on top of things that way. So anticipate probably this year some information about that solar project coming out and potentially some necessary action by either county board committees or the full county board. We are also going to continue to work on broadband. There was a $200 million grant that came out sorry, it was a $43 million grant that had 200-something applications. $43 million grant called the Capital Projects Fund that was issued by the Public Service Commission for broadband. We had 6 different applications from ISPs, internet service providers in our area that applied for that money. One did get it. Bug Tussle got an award to work kind of in the southern part of our county. So they will be connecting fiber, but we're going to help them through a conduit debt process similar to what we've been doing in the past. So Fond du Lac County actually issues debt that we guarantee for Bug Tussle to come in and lay some fiber in our area. So there will be action coming forward on broadband for the Capital Projects Fund. We also are in the midst of planning for the largest ever broadband spending, which is the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment federal program, where Wisconsin is going to be receiving north of $1 billion in funding to ISPs to expand broadband. This is not going to be something we're applying for. It's going to be something that internet service providers are applying for, but we have some money set aside to help us prep for it, and we are going to probably start mailing some postcards out and doing some things to make sure that we're in the best position possible to get as much money into Jefferson County as we can. The broadband working group just last week or the week before kind of discussed some of those issues, and I'd be happy to talk more. But broadband is going to remain an issue, especially given the size of the investment that's coming into the state. EMS and shared services is going to come up. People probably in the town of Lake Mills, Cambridge, and town of Oakland area are eminently familiar with this, but we are getting requests from a number of different communities to take a look at EMS as a county-wide, not entity is not the right word, a county-wide something, just to see about shared services and what feasibilities might be. It's going to be something we're getting pressures from local units of government. You probably are getting pressures from some of your constituents as well. And so I anticipate it being an upcoming issue. We're also continuing to deal with shared services like GIS positions in Watertown, Fort Atkinson, some other municipalities, some things with communications with different law enforcement agencies in the area. So EMS and shared services will be coming up. We always are looking at employee pay and market data. We put a lot of time into some market studies this past go-around, and a lot of money the last county board put into market adjustments for people that are outside of 10% where the market looks. A vast chunk of that was due to some of the already highly paid positions being even further outside market, so I think a major cost was already done, but we can't fall behind on this. It's just going to continue to be an issue. If you don't adjust this time, the adjustment next time is going to have to be bigger. And so I, again, continue to see that being an issue. The courthouse is in phase 2 of the building project and will be beginning phase 3. The Building Grounds Committee will continue to be busy overseeing this massive redevelopment project, but there may be additional change orders and things that are needed. We went through a strategic plan process that affects the next 2 items. Through the strategic plan, the Finance Committee and then later the full county board adopted a matrix for priority-based budgeting. So we're going to look at our budget broken down by what everyone does and what every department does and score how it ranks in that scoring matrix. So we can understand whether we're spending money in a way that is directed by our planning, and also if we can find some efficiencies where multiple departments are doing similar or the same tasks. I've sent a couple emails about this, and I've got a couple people volunteering, but we will be doing priority-based budgeting peer review teams, so the department heads will score their areas themselves, and then we'll set up peer review teams to meet and go through those areas in an independent way to determine whether or not what the department head said accurately reflects how they fit in with that scoring matrix. We also have a number of strategic plan initiatives coming out of our implementation plan. That plan is a 10-year plan. It goes until 2033. And so for the next 10 years, people sitting through this orientation are going to be hearing that we're going to be talking about strategic plan initiatives. What they are, we don't know yet exactly, but we have a pretty good idea. They follow the strategic plan that was adopted by this body. And finally, I think it would be fair to say we are going to continue to debate and see proposals for the sale of county-owned land. This here is in the southwest part of the city of Jefferson. Over here is our highway department, here is our health and human services campus, here is our workforce center, and here is our park maintenance center. This area here is part of county-owned farmland. with this being a concept plan for what's called the Food and Beverage Innovation Campus. This is not up to date, but recently, is it closed yet, or is it? Next week, we're hopefully closing on the sale of 100 acres to, I can say it right? Yeah, I think so, to Kikkoman, who is going to be building a massive manufacturing facility here. That sale is going to bring in about $3 million, but we are already having people approach us about some additional sale in the area. So some of these lots might be subdivided, might be broken up, and might be sold. So I would anticipate that being an issue that the next board will have to deal with. Any questions on any upcoming county stuff? Hopefully this gives you a good base so you know what you're getting yourselves into. All right, the Jefferson County budget in the briefest of terms. The budget is a year-long process, starting every year. I guess that's pretty obvious. And it's undergoing right now. April, we are seeing requests for staffing changes in the MIS budget, and there are tasks that will take us all the way through the passage of the budget in November. So quickly, the budget timeline. Right now, departments are going through 5-year capital planning, any of their capital planning requests, so equipment, buildings, things like that, are due in April to the finance director and the county administrator. There are also requests due to the HR director and the county administrator for position reclassifications and new position requests. Once that's all in, MIS, our IT department, is going to be taking technology, equipment, and programming requests. Those are due in May. And once that's all synthesized and we appropriately cost everything out, we will have a budget kickoff meeting in June. That will be for the county board and department heads, and the county administrator will give a presentation to kick all that off. Kind of set out the parameters, some of the trends we're seeing, and then departments will go back and prepare their own budgets that will be then due to the county administrator in August for review by the county finance committee, which will then have 4 budget hearings in September. And once they finalize it, they will present their budget to the county board in October. There will be a public hearing at the October meeting, a different October meeting, and then budget will be passed in November. So this is an annual process that's ongoing right now. So understanding the very basics of public budgeting, local governments are limited in the amount of tax dollars they can charge. So that's our tax levy. It's under what's called levy limits. The state of Wisconsin imposes them upon us. And we are given a formula for the Department of Revenue, and we are only able to increase our levy by that amount of net new construction that comes in and increase our equalized value. So if our county is not receiving any net new construction, we are unable to increase our tax levy and charge any more in taxes. Equalized value itself is also a formula. So we take in all the value of the real property in our county, submit that to the State Department of Revenue, and they run a formula to equalize that value so that it's uniform across the state. So areas like Woodruff, Minocqua, that have a ton of very property-rich areas on some very nice lakes, are not necessarily going to be that much further ahead or further behind areas like in Grant County, where the property values are not as high. So we then take our countywide tax levy, and we divide that by the equalized value that comes back from the Department of Revenue, and we multiply it by 1,000 with the mill, like centimeter is 1/100th and a millimeter is 1/1000th. So a mill rate is the countywide tax levy divided by the equalized value times 1,000. So a mill rate is kind of an idea of how much we are charging. In this last budget, the total tax levy went down and the mill rate went down. Part of that is due to some financing decisions that were made about paying down debt early, and part of it was due to a massive increase in equalized value that was not followed up by increased spending. So that's basics of public budgeting. Mark would be happy to explain more. That about reaches my limit. By the numbers, our budget is $106 million, $425,552. So $106.4 million budget spend. Our mill rate is 3.062, and we take in a countywide tax levy just north of $33 million. We also take in 2 different non-countywide levies, Our health department is also with the full city of Watertown, which includes portions of Dodge County, so that tax levy is not included in our countywide levy. And the highway department also takes in a different fund based on some of their accounting needs and things like that, and formulas with the state. So that is also not included in our countywide tax levy. But this captures most of it. I think our full tax levy is somewhere around 35 million. You can see by this pie chart what some of our major expenditures are. Some of the text might be small, but this large portion down here is health and human services. That is by far our largest spend in the budget. Some of it is recaptured through state funding. Actually, a majority of it is recaptured through state funding. But what we spend of this $106 million is almost 2/5 of it is on health and human services. The next largest is on public safety, mainly our sheriff's department. It might not surprise you then to hear that between our health and human services and our sheriff's department, we've hit more than, or about half of that 699 staffing figure. So those are by far our two largest departments. General government is our next category. Not quite sure what gets wrapped up into all of that, but it is 15% of our budget. It's probably more of a catch-all term. Excluding public works, which again is highway, we do have culture, recreation, education at 4%, conservation development at 2%, capital outlay, so kind of our capital stuff is 9%, and then debt service 4%. We are limited by how much debt we can take out, but we have really had a pretty conservative policy when it comes to debt, and we'll continue that, those recommendations. So this gives you a little bit of a breakdown of our budget. Any questions? Okay, our strategic plan, again, in the most briefest of terms, was adopted by this last county board last November, 2023 to 2033 strategic plan, and it has some key points, one of which is a mission statement, which is our mission is to enhance the quality of life by providing exceptional services and programs to our community. A vision statement, which says we are a place to spend a lifetime, a welcoming community with a thriving economy, cherished roots, and an innovative mindset. And 4 key priority areas: diverse housing opportunities, highly regarded quality of life, intentional economic growth, and transformative government. Each of those have goals and objectives that are underneath those goals, and finally, action steps that will get us to those objectives, that'll get us to those goals, that'll get us to those priorities, and make sure we have a highly regarded quality of life here in Jefferson County. Implementation teams are meeting regularly. I provide a quarterly update to the board on how that's going, and if anyone has any questions on the strategic plan at any time, please ask me. Right now, 2 of our teams, Transformative Government, which Brian leads in the back, and Diverse Housing Opportunities are both done and ready to be published and started working on. If you are looking for any additional resources, again, the Wisconsin Counties Association is a great source. Attend one of their conferences, look on their website, look at some of those materials they've published. I also participated this February in a conference from the National Association of Counties, kind of WCA's national counterpart called NACO. Ben is also involved in NACO, and I would encourage anyone that might be interested in kind of seeing how counties nationwide are dealing with some things like broadband, public works, and stuff like that to get involved. They have a whole vast repository of information as well. There are files in Microsoft Teams. The University of Wisconsin Extension has a local government education center that has a ton of stuff, and there are links to some of that in Teams. You can also always go to the county administrator and to corporation counsel and to department heads. I do want to repeat that. Even though it seems like Ben and Danielle have a lot going on, which they do, they are always going to be open for questions. So please, 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 if you have a question, don't feel like it is not worth their time. Approach Ben, approach Danielle, approach a department head. That was another piece of feedback I got, or people seemed like it might not rise to the level of needing their attention. That's what we're here for. Please come to us with questions. And that is all I have. Speaking of questions, that is the last thing on the agenda. If there are any, I will take them. And if not, I guess we can ask the county board chair if there's anything else we need to do.
Nope.
Okay.
Show up next week.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded. Not needed, but appreciated.